So this evening, we're going to talk about exercise and activity requirements do change after Parkinson's diagnosis, as my script for today was very much about young, early onset. You guys are young, and what is the specific things that you need to know compared to what people in the later stage may be receiving. And this is where evidence and research and rehab has dramatically changed, and especially within my lifetime as being a clinician. I've been a neurophysio for just over 20 years now, and what we do now is radically different to what I was doing 10 years ago. And this is all about what you need to be doing as someone who is young. Okay, so as a lovely introduction from Kate, thank you very much. So this is the team that I have here in New Zealand, so Connect Neuro Physiotherapy. So I've got a lovely bunch of some other senior neurophysios and also some physio assistants and student interns. I'm also the New Zealand PD Warrior instructor trainer. So I worked at PD Warrior in Sydney for 4 years, and that's where I gleaned a lot of my Parkinson's knowledge from. So I'm as I say, the instructor here. I'm also an LSVT registered instructor for those of you who know either of those programs. And I always try and practice what I preach as well, which is get out there and do some exercise. And the main thing that it really drives me is passionate about empowerment, because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how much I know if I don't do a good job at sharing it. And you are the individuals there living with Parkinson's, and the support people, the carers, the wives, the husbands, and you're the ones that need to know what I know, because you're the ones who have then got the power to make that difference. So just starting off with some facts. So 1 in 20 diagnosed with Parkinson's are younger than 40. So hence, obviously, this emphasis, I keep saying the young. Parkinson's very much used to be known as a older person's condition, and that is definitely being flipped on its head now. So 1 in 20. So that's really some quite big stats, when young in Parkinson's is still often referred to 50 and 60-year-olds. It's just being aware really how young that diagnosis can be. But also what is actually quite some shocking news now is that Parkinson's is the fastest growing neurological condition. And the experts actually believe that we're going to have a bit of a Parkinson's pandemic in the next kind of 20 to 50 years time, because unlike a lot of the other neurological conditions where we're improving treatments or diagnosis of how it's going, there seems to be more and more people with Parkinson's. Now, there's a whole nother presentation of why that might be, so I'm not going to go into that now, but it's just to raise the fact that we are going to have a lot more young people being diagnosed with Parkinson's. So today's journey, we're going to talk a little bit about why someone with Parkinson's does actually need to change the way that they exercise. Even if you've been really committed exerciser all of your life, the requirements do change slightly. And then for some of you, you may never have been a big exerciser. And this is the bad news about the talk. It is all about exercise. So I will hopefully do my best to convince you why exercise is required. So also about how much is enough, because that's always the golden question, isn't it? How much do you really have to do to make a difference? So in general, the what, why, when, how, who of exercise and Parkinson's is going to get covered today. Before I go much further, I have sent a copy of these slides to Kate. So if any of you are madly writing notes, as I say, Kate is recording it, and there will be a copy of my slides going out afterwards. So feel free to just kind of sit back and listen for now. So why is exercise non-negotiable in Parkinson's? By the time majority of you have been diagnosed, you have shown some form of sign of Parkinson's. Now, those signs are going to be a motor sign. So that is either going to be some rigidity, okay, some bradykinesia. So that's stiffness and that's slow movement. So your classic is not swinging the arm when walking. You might have noticed your handwriting getting smaller. You may have had an onset of a tremor. So by the time that diagnosis has been made, you have lost 80% of your dopamine producing cells. that means you already have neurological change in your brain. So even at diagnosis, where you might still be feeling pretty good and you might be like, well, how important is it at the moment to get my exercise and that in order? Absolutely, because your brain has already started to change. You've already started to show movement abnormalities. Now, again, you might not be that aware of these movement abnormalities, and you've had a change in sensory calibration, and I'll discuss a little bit more about that on the next slide because it is quite important. But to understand that your walking has probably changed. You probably are not getting a good enough heel strike on one of your legs. You've probably lost what we call axial rotation, some rotation around your chest when walking, and probably also lost a bit of an arm swing. So those movement I can't say that word tonight, abnormalities means that your body is starting to change. Like your natural human movements will become more solidified of whatever you spend the most amount of time doing. So if you spend most of your day shuffling, then that will become your new normal. So this is why that putting that change in early is really important. There is lots of secondary impairments. So we've got primary impairments of Parkinson's. So I've mentioned a couple of them already, which is your tremor, bradykinesia, rigidity. We've got motor and non-motor. So some of those non-motor is the anxiety, depression, apathy. But we've also got secondary impairments. So these are what are some of the consequences of the primary impairments. And biggest one of those is weakness. Now, weakness isn't a primary issue for Parkinson's, but it's a secondary due to lack of movement. Because at diagnosis, the Parkinson's population is 30% less active than an age-matched norm. So even though you think you might be exercising well, you are likely to be 30% less active than someone without Parkinson's. And that in itself, obviously, can be a huge implication on health risks regarding heart, lungs, as well as things like mobility and muscle weakness. And unfortunately, the medical interventions that we have at the moment, although they're very good at helping with your symptoms, okay, they do not stop the progression. Your medication isn't stopping the progression. Deep brain stimulation, apomorphine pumps, etc., don't stop the Parkinson's progression, because if they did stop it, we would have found a cure. So this is not to be the doom and gloom side, but this slide is just to really emphasize why you can't wait to do all the things that I'm going to ask you to do over the next amount of slides, because these changes are already there in the young population. And also, unfortunately, evolution is currently not in our favor. As we all sat at home in a lockdown, it's probably emphasized even more. But something I always try and touch on in a lot of my talks is that we evolved as a human being thousands of years ago to walk about over a marathon a day, hunt and gather our food, our arms were for lifting and carrying. And then it's only really been since the Industrial Revolution with cars and automatic, factories and stuff that we've become less active. And then in the last 30 years, it's a technology revolution that has completely made us inactive. And my example is that we've got to the point now that we don't even want to walk around a supermarket because we'll do click and collect instead. So that really shows you that the lifestyle that is perceived as normal now is not the lifestyle that the human body evolved thousands of years ago. And this has happened within, 1 to 2 lifetimes. So we know that evolution hasn't caught up with our dramatic change in the physical load we put on our human body. So sensory calibration. So I mentioned this briefly a couple of slides ago. This is one of the trickiest things for someone with Parkinson's to grasp, and also the support person. So wife, husband, children, carers, whoever that team is that you actually have now an altered perception of your movement. So the classic is that you feel that you're moving around normally. You may be aware that you might be a bit slower. You may be aware that your arm doesn't swing as much. You may be aware that you're shuffling a bit. But it's often not until you get some video feedback for someone to show you exactly how are you moving, is it quite shocking to see how altered your movement is. And this is especially when we're asking you to do some really big high effort movements and asking you to put in 80% effort. And then we take the video and show you that what your 80% feels like actually looks like 40%. And now this is really tricky, because when we normally get up from the sofa to go to the kitchen to make a drink, we don't think left leg, right leg, take a big step. Where's my arm swinging? How am I walking? We just think about whether we're going to get a biscuit out of the cupboard or not when we go get that drink. So for someone with Parkinson's to then have to actually think about their movements for the whole waking day is a huge ask. Because as humans, we spend our whole time dual tasking and thinking about other things than our automatic movements like walking. But as I say, for someone with Parkinson's, you actually do have to think about your movements, and you do need the team around you to keep prompting you. Now, prompting is not nagging, okay? And I did use the word prompting, not nagging. So, encouraging people to move big, encouraging someone to be able to swing their arm, and just reminding them that they've fallen into the bad habit of their Parkinson's movement, which is the shuffle. So the real tricky thing about this is that this is very hard to train yourself, and hence why you do need some regular expert input. So that's why the programs like PD Warrior and LSVT Big have been so successful in treating Parkinson's in rehab over the last 5 to 8 years. And both of these programs recommend regular catch-ups. Now, whether that is once a month or once every 6 months, with an expert neurological health professional to make sure that you haven't fallen into that slippery slope of shuffling around again, rather than being able to take those big strides. So exercise and medication, because it always comes up, these questions. So I've started putting this slide much earlier in the talk. The whole reason why we encourage medication at the start of your diagnosis. So if anyone has been diagnosed and not on medication, I strongly recommend you talk to your neurologist about why you're not on medication. It's all about trying to keep your brain in optimal function. An analogy I often use here is anyone who's into cars, is if you've got a fancy car, you don't run it on the last kind of 10% of the tank the whole time, because you get all that gunk and all that, bad stuff at the bottom of the tank that can ruin the engine. So imagine that about your dopamine levels. If you've already lost 80% of your dopamine levels and you're trying to get your whole brain to function cognitively and physically on only 20% of what used to be 100%, you're not going to be optimal. And that's where the medication can give you that artificial boost to put you into the optimal amount, because your brain is much more likely to function as it should with the right neurotransmitter doses. Now, the good thing about exercise, it has been shown that exercise increases the efficiency of your medication. So regarding long-term use of medication, the more you exercise, that has been shown to decrease how much medication dosage you may need in that long-term trajectory. So rather than, every few years having to increase your dose and increase your dose and increase your dose as your Parkinson's progress, is that exercise has been shown to keep that dose of medication low when exercising effectively. Now, should you be on or off when exercising? the recommendation is you should be on, so optimal, okay? After 30 minutes of taking it, up to about that 2-hour window, so between 30 minutes to 2 hours post taking your medication is the prime time to exercise purposefully. Because otherwise, if you are trying to exercise when you are off, you are not going to move optimally. You are not going to keep your brain in the best possible shape from a movement point of view. Now, there's nothing wrong with exercising off, okay, if you just happens to be the time or, you know, the odd day. But if you want to get best bang for your buck, try to make sure you exercise while on medication. So the powerful impact of exercise. Now, hopefully, you know, Australians, and some of you might not be Australian, but now reside in Australia, is that you're a fit country, okay? Wellness, you get good weather, you get outside, you know, being a participant in activity and exercise isn't new for a lot of Australians, because you know it's good for your heart, you know it's good for your lungs, it's good for your muscles and your bone density and your state of mind. Like, yeah, I'm not going to talk about all those benefits of exercise, but do you know how beneficial exercise is for your brain? Because that's the bit that's really changed in the last kind of 5 to 10 years. So neuroprotection. Neuroprotection is for everyone over the age of 25. So from the age of 25, we all start losing brain cells, unfortunately. Now, neuroprotection is what happens when you get puffing and panting out of breath. So I'll say that again, puffing and panting out of breath, working really hard. When you are doing that, you release an amazing chemical hormone into your brain called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and that increases the activity in your brain and reduces axon dieback. So everyone's brain is losing volume from the age of 25. Those with Parkinson's are losing brain volume faster than those without, and it is exercise that's been the only thing proven by research to help preserve brain mass volume, okay? But it is only achieved when you get puffing and panting out of breath. And that is the biggest thing that's going to help reduce things like dementia, Alzheimer's, and those types of things. Next, we've got neuroplasticity. Now, neuroplasticity has been around, a bit of a buzzword now for, again, last 5 to 10 years. And, you know, very much thanks to the author, Canadian author, Norman Doidge, for his work in this. But what you have to remember about neuroplasticity, which is basically the way that the brain can rewire itself. So we're not hardwired, we are soft-wired, is that neuroplasticity happens 24 hours a day, whether we want it to or not. So in Parkinson's, if you are shuffling and not swinging an arm and stooped and not moving big and powerfully, your brain will plastically change for that to be the normal, because your brain will change to wherever you spend the most amount of time. If you purposefully exercise to be big, to be powerful, to swing those arms and take those big steps, you are going to plastically drive your brain to keep that pattern as your normal. So what you do is what you create that habit to be, is how you will hopefully stay. And then the third one is neurorestoration. Now, exercise, and this is where exercise is very powerful with medication, is the brain is very much, if you don't use it, you lose it. So when you lose that 80% of your dopamine producing cells, your dopamine receiving cells, they don't die off. It's only the producing cells that get died off. The receiving cells, they don't really have anything to do because there's not much dopamine going across the synaptic cleft. So they just go to sleep. And then when you add the artificial dopamine in, the receiving guys are still asleep. which means that sometimes your uptake isn't very good. And I know there'll be a number of you listening tonight who will go, I take meds, Jill, but they don't really make much difference. And that might be because these guys are asleep. And it's through exercise that you can open up the receiving end. So that means that when you are producing your natural dopamine or your artificial dopamine, there is more cells to then open up and take that medication to where it needs to go. So these are the 3 key things that exercise does in your brain. Helps protect brain volume. It helps to drive good plastic change of how you want to move, and it helps to open silent pathways. There is no medication out there to date that achieves these 3 things. There's some medication they're trying to get to produce BDNF, but it's causing loads of side effects. The side effect of exercise is all good, okay? We basically just get stronger and fitter. So when you exercise, it's magic you produce in your brain. So every time you get out of breath, don't worry about the getting out of breath and, oh God, you know, this is hard work. Think about the magic you are producing in your nerve cells and keeping your brain as healthy as you possibly can. So I talked a little bit before about human evolution and how we've changed very rapidly due to Industrial Revolution, and that there is this difference now between what I would classify as physical activity and exercise, because physical activity is what I would determine, okay, as just being human. That is walking 10,000 steps a day, because you were born with 2 legs to walk. Okay, that is spending half a day in a garden. That is doing the housework. That is doing an active job, because we were evolved to be on our feet for the day and use our arms. So that is not exercise, okay? Physical activity is just day-to-day functioning. And this is where now in modern day life, the lines have really blurred, and a lot of people think that physical activity is exercise, and then they wonder why they don't get better. They wonder why they start getting weaker with their Parkinson's. They wonder why they start having falls, etc. So question yourself, what is your baseline physical activity like? Are you walking 10,000 steps a day, just being active on your feet, moving around? Now, for some of you, the thought of walking 10,000 steps a day would, you'll be like, oh my God, Jill, I'm not that fit. There's no way I can do that. And that's okay, because it just means that you're not that fit yet, that you're going to have to do some purposeful exercise to bring your physical activity levels up and then be able to exercise. So we've got physical activity is just about being human. And then we've got exercise. So I define exercise as something that you are going to do purposefully, that is going to be challenging. Now, whether that is challenging your strength, whether it's challenging you cognitively by learning to tango dance, whether it's challenging you cardiovascularly, it is something that you're going to book out in your head or in your diary that I'm off to do some exercise. It is not just I'm off to live a normal, healthy human life. Now, all exercise was not created equally. Sorry, guys, just have a drink. This is the big thing that changes with Parkinson's, that yes, I want you to be exercising and I want you to be really physically active, but how you exercise is really, really important with Parkinson's. So we've got what we call neuropassive. So neuropassive exercise is you're going out for a walk, you might be doing some yoga, might be doing some Pilates. It's just about keeping those muscles strong, keeping some flexibility. As neurological physios and neuro rehab experts, we are in the world of neuroactive exercise. Neuroactive exercise is hard, it's challenging, it's out of breath, it's dual tasking. It's things that are going to help what we call reduce the cortical silent period within your brain. So it's exercise that's actually going to create those neuroplastic and neuroprotective motions I talked about a moment ago. And I'm going to explain a little bit more in a moment about what neuroactive exercise really is. Because Parkinson's exercise is radically different to anything you've done before. And even as a health expert teaching Parkinson's exercise, it is unique. There's no other neurological condition that I use this approach with, because Parkinson's movement disorder is unique of how we need to work with it. So what I want to get at here is that if you haven't seen an expert, and when I talk about a neurological health expert, so whether that's a neurophysio or an exercise physiologist who has done some Parkinson's training, so ideally finding someone who's either done the PD Warrior course or the LSVT big course, is you can't be expected to know how to move properly and how to exercise with Parkinson's unless you've seen a health professional with those qualifications to teach you, because it's a pretty hard set of rules to understand. Also, what we're now doing in the neuro rehab world, which is quite exciting, this PD Warrior brought out this approach a couple of years ago, is about within the diagnosis of Parkinson's, is kind of what subtype of Parkinson's you have, because it does change how we're going to exercise you. Okay, so again, exercise is not a one size fits all. Exercise for Parkinson's isn't a one size fits all, because you are all individual. So if you are more bradykinetic dominant, so that is your small, slow movements, the shuffle, the lack of arm swing, the difficulty doing your buttons up, the small handwriting, etc. What we're going to do for you is amplitude and power training. So really big over the top movements with a lot of power in those movements. If you're more tremor dominant, which is obviously the obvious, it's that you've got more of an obvious tremor than the bradykinesia, you will respond much better to what we call forced use exercise. So that's by getting you to do sprints on a bike that you can see the RPM you're doing. That's where we get you with a soft ball and doing ball slams really hard so you can see how much power you need to put into something. And agility impaired is for those who've already started falling. Okay, so someone with Parkinson's who is starting to lose balance, okay, and starting to have falls, is what we're going to work on mostly, is balance and dual tasking training, because it's the inability to dual task, which unfortunately is what's causing the falls. So principles instead of methods. Okay, so I talked about the need to do neuroactive exercise, and Parkinson's exercise is different. So I'm going to use the PD Warrior 7 core principles to go through the method of how you should be exercising, because it doesn't matter what you do. You could be boxing, you could be dancing, you could be a cyclist, you could be a swimmer. It's not about the what, it's about the how that is most important. So the first one, sticking with the bradykinetic form, is this think big amplitude. So we need you at some point every day for several minutes is to do these really big over the top movements. And I've got a video to show in a few slides time of these big over the top movements, okay? Because what you're trying to do with the big over the top movements is recalibrate your brain of where your normal is. Because if we think, if normal's here and the Parkinson's is constantly trying to make you small and slow, that your normal will start to drop down here. So we use these absolutely big over the top movements, which are much, much, much bigger than normal, to remind your brain where your outer limits are, so that your brain hopefully stays in this fluctuation of normal rather than reducing down here. High effort. You have to exercise hard enough to get a cardiovascular response, which means you are puffing and panting out of breath. Now, the good news is I'm not talking about turning you into Olympic marathon runners, okay? It can be as short as 30 seconds of getting out of breath. The Parkinson's exercises that we prescribe, you got to do 6 reps, okay? 6 reps takes all of about 30 seconds max, and it's about doing them with so much power that you get that heart rate and that effort up. But also, it's this high effort as part of that calibration training. So again, for someone with Parkinson's who started to get slower and started to shuffle, is that you are going to have to think about putting about 30% more effort into your everyday normal movements all day, every day, for them to be appearing back to normal. And that's hard work. If you can imagine that you've got to move with 30% more effort, everything you do throughout the day, that's pretty tiring. However, not to sugarcoat Parkinson's, but with Parkinson's, you do have the ability to move well. You haven't necessarily had a stroke or a spinal cord injury and had complete loss of function of that body part, okay? So with Parkinson's, it's hard and it's constant, but you have the ability. Power, okay? We have to do exercises that involve power. So excuse me. Now, power is how fast you can move with force, okay? And a classic powerful exercise is getting up off a chair, sit to stands. Now, I can guarantee that there's many of you in the audience who would have started to find standing up off a low chair or a low sofa hard work, having to hold on, pull yourself up on something. That is because you've lost power in those thigh muscles to work with force, okay? So the only way that you can get power back is by training it, okay? So going for a walk isn't going to give you power in your legs back. Doing squats with power and going with that speed up is where you're going to get that power again. And if you are young and active, one of the best things you can be doing to maintain power is jumping. Things like skipping, hopping, bounding. And any of you that, haven't exercised for a while, I can unfortunately say if you have a go at hopping, skipping or bounding, you might find that there's not much recoil in those muscles. You might find that you might go boop. Okay, so that shows you that it's that power that you need to get back. Fourth one, individual. And I can't stress this enough, is that there is not, exercise in Parkinson's isn't a cookie cutter. There is not a program that works exactly the same for everyone, because you are all unique and individual. That is not only your Parkinson's, but also your exercise likes and dislikes. Some people love a gym. Some people hate a gym. Some people love group exercise. Other people hate group exercise. You don't train an Olympic gymnast the same way you train an Olympic weightlifter. So again, with Parkinson's, it's that specific training, and pulling you back to the slide before about if you're tremor dominant, bradykinetic dominant, or agility impaired, will change how you need to exercise. And I was talking to someone earlier about exercise for their condition today, and I said it's all about bang for your buck. None of us have all of the time in the world. We are, unfortunately, of a society that's getting more and more time poor. So if you are putting some protected, precious time aside to exercise, you want to make sure you're getting the best bang for your buck. You don't want to be spending an hour, 30 minutes every day exercising for the next 2 years to find out that it wasn't the most beneficial. Now, no exercise is bad exercise, team, but if you could be assured that what you were doing was going to produce better results, then that's going to really help your motivation. And again, knowing what's best for you comes from that individual one-on-one assessment with an expert in Parkinson's rehab. So our fifth one is challenge. Now, challenge is one of the hardest things to work with an adult population. And the reason I say that is because you guys don't like failing. Okay, so challenge is that you need to be doing an exercise that you actually get wrong about 50% of the time. Now, if I put any of you into a salsa dancing class and you were spending half the time going the wrong way while the class went the other way, most of you might not enjoy that. And most of you will probably not want to go back to salsa dancing because you'd say, I'm no good at it. And unfortunately, as adults, we tend to very much stick with the things that we like, which tend to be the things that we're good at. So finding an exercise that is challenging, especially a dual tasking exercise, is that you have to change your mind frame of being okay with not being great at it. It is all right to get it wrong, because every time you get it wrong, you are actually protecting your brain better. And it's got to be fun. Okay, so exercise is hard enough as it is to motivate yourself to get out there and exercise. So it's got to be that individual. Is it a group class? Is it a one-on-one? Is it that you love water sports? Okay, is it getting back to tennis? Is it hiking mountains? You know, it's got to be something that actually brings a smile to your face. And it has to be daily. When it comes to your Parkinson's specific exercises, you have to do movements daily, because your Parkinson's is there 24/7. Even newly diagnosed, it is there trying to change your movements in a negative way. So you have to actively combat that negative change. So here's a bit of a video. Now this video is made up of a few things, so I'm going to kind of stop and pause it a couple of times as we go through. So the first bit is me doing a PD Warrior training for instructors. So these are physios and exercise physiologists here in New Zealand at an instructor training course last year. And this just shows you some of the exercises that we would teach them. So they're doing big, powerful movements. Okay, so that's them doing those really big over the top movements, you know, lots of feedback, lots of how strong it was. Now, this is a group of my young individuals with Parkinson's, and this is a warm up of our Parkinson's class. And what you'll see here is that they're all just struggling with their challenge part, that coordination. Fingers. And they're all struggling just the same, guys. Don't worry, this is you, you're doing it all together. Try and get the flick of the hand and put some bit of effort into this line. Which I'll put my heart rate up already. And the main thing is to get your heart rate up. Okay, so don't worry about doing it perfectly. And then we've got a chap here who has a lot of issues with freezing. So though he is still very much in the young category, he has had his Parkinson's for a few years already. So here we're doing is one of those more forced use. So for that tremor dominant, but this one's also to help his agility impaired. So we'll watch him do some bull slams, timing with some sidestepping. Tiny. Tiny. And then the last little bit of this video is actually just us having some fun. So in our Parkinson's class here, for one of the warm-up exercises, we're doing some breathing work that they're having to try and blow ping pong balls into the goal via a straw. This was obviously when we weren't in a COVID lockdown. So that's our part of making our class fun. So you're all going, oh my God, how much exercise does this person want me to do? So here are the basics. Physical activity. You need to be really thinking about how many steps are you taking, how much time are you spending sitting, how much time are you out being just generally active. So 10,000 steps is a great ball mark. Now, for some of you, you might only be sitting at 3,000 or 4,000 steps at the moment. That's okay. Just aim to gradually increase 500 steps more each week and just keep gradually building yourself back up to where that acceptable amount is. You should be strength training twice a week. Now that is whether you have Parkinson's or not. So again, for those support workers, carers, wives, husbands joining in today, is that from the age of 40, we all experience what we call sarcopenia, which is the loss of muscle tissue. The only way to get muscle tissue back or to keep it is purposeful strength training. So it is absolutely more apparent that your 60 and 70-year-old individuals are going to the gym and lifting iron and lifting weights than it is your 20-year-old, which seems quite counter to what we currently see in gyms at the moment. So twice a week strength training. You need to be doing some good cardiovascular exercise for 30 minutes, 3 to 4 times a week. That also includes some period in that half an hour of exercise that you're getting puffing and panting out of breath as well for that neurological protection in your brain. And PD specific exercises, generally I would prescribe about 4. So you're looking at about anywhere between 10 to 15 minutes of Parkinson's specific exercises. Now, I would be recommending that you would be doing them in the morning because that's a really good time to recalibrate your brain for the rest of the day. So we've got being physically active, strength training twice a week, cardio 3 to 4 times a week, and Parkinson's daily. Is it easy? Absolutely not. Okay, so obviously we can take a horse to water, but you ain't going to make him drink, because what happens in Parkinson's is non-motor symptoms. If you are tired, apathetic, depressed, anxious, decreased motivation, not because of choice, but because of a chemical imbalance in your brain due to a dopamine loss, it is extremely difficult to get yourself up every morning and make yourself do all of that exercise I've asked you to do. So the short answer here is you can't do it by yourself. You need a support team. You need as much accountability and help around you as possible, because it is so difficult to do by yourself. We also have, issues about the poor knowledge of disease process, okay, that we're not getting enough referrals as health professionals of young, okay, the young, the minimally impaired, the newly diagnosed, because we want to treat you and get you up to speed while you don't really have any issues, okay? And that's not quite happening in our healthcare systems at the moment. We're not getting those referral rates to the experts. And I'm sure if I ask for a show of hands, that I'm sure that for all of you here who's got a diagnosis of Parkinson's, how many of you have actually been referred to a neurological physio for your Parkinson's at time of diagnosis? So some of you have, which is amazing, but there's probably a bunch of you that still have got no idea what a neurophysio does, okay? And also the doing well at present. Lots of people believe that they're doing well. So why do they need to see someone at this point? And I've got a whole slide on this because this is my target audience for those who think that they're doing well, got my medication from the neurologist. I'll see them once a year or once every 6 months, and I'll go see their health expert, the physio, when things get bad. It's too late, guys. If you start falling, evidence and research has shown us that we can't stop you falling once you've started. But we can try and stop you falling before you start. Okay, the evidence supports that. So you do have to start now. Okay, there is no better time because you've already got changes in your brain and your body's movement patterns. And we are all in this business to keep you well. We want to keep you as well as you possibly are and as independent and as high functioning as you possibly can be, because you have the potential to change your own trajectory. And this is what is exciting for individuals with Parkinson's now who are young and newly diagnosed, is that the medication's better. You're starting the medication way earlier than people who were diagnosed 10, 20 years ago. And now we know that exercise and the specific way of exercising has this role in neurological protection, that we know that we've got this cohort of individuals now with Parkinson's who may look very different in 10 to 20 years' time compared to the current population who have been living with their condition for the last 10 to 20 years. So you do have some power over your own trajectory with this Parkinson's condition. And also the unfortunate thing is you can't bank exercise. So it doesn't matter if you were an Olympic rower, okay, or gymnast 10 years ago, but you're a couch potato now, is that you still have to keep exercising. So true success comes from teamwork, okay? So I can't encourage you enough to make sure that you've got a really supportive team around you. Now that's loved ones, that's family, but that's also your health professionals and your friends, okay? Tell your friends that you're not allowed to not swing your arm. Tell your friends that if they see you shuffling, they have to prompt you, because it's too hard for you to do it all by progress forwards. So just to recap the basics, be physically active, strength train twice a week, get puffing and panting out of breath 3 to 4 times a week, and try and do your specific Parkinson's exercises for your subtype of Parkinson's for about 10 to 15 minutes every day. Why is exercise non-negotiable in Parkinson's? You've already got brain changes, even at diagnosis. You've already got a movement, I can't say that word today, talk, can I? You've already got movement abnormalities. There is secondary impairments already, like weakness starting to happen. The medical intervention does not stop the progression. It's exercise that can help slow the progression down. And unfortunately, we know that at diagnosis, you generally have got 30% less physically active than an age-matched normal. So take-home messages is activity and exercise type and intensity has to change with a Parkinson's diagnosis. There is 7 core principles, okay, to help make sure that you're exercising well, and that exercise is physical activity, strength, cardio, and Parkinson's specific. Every accomplishment starts with just a decision to try. So hopefully, if anything you've taken from today is that you just got to at least go out there and try to be a little bit more active, and maybe try to go and find the exercise professional to point you in the right direction. So, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and I'm quite happy to stay around for a few questions. What I will just do is